Good morning, folks. Afternoon, possibly where you are. This is another edition of MMA Church Livestream. What a night and day we had of fights Saturday. Holy crap. Obviously, we're going to get into some of that stuff, but before we do, I'm going to share my screen here. I want to talk about what I use for this live stream, which is called Ecamm Live. It's probably the best streaming software that you can use. The cool thing is you can use it with Zoom. You can use it with all other platforms if you're trying to live stream or do live chats with people online. You can also just record directly to your computer so you don't have to go live. But Ecamm Live is what it is. I'm going to share my screen, throw out this little promotional video so that you can see exactly what Ecamm Live is and what it has done for me.
Do you want to start a video podcast but don't know where to start? Or maybe you've been podcasting for a while but you're bored with the traditional audio-only format. Either way, I've got just the thing. Ecamm Live is the number one choice for busy podcasters who want to easily create professional-looking video podcasts. But why? They're more engaging for your audience, and video keeps their attention, so they're more likely.
That was Ecamm Live. It's pretty dope. I love the product, and I think you will too. So in the show notes below, you can see exactly what Ecamm Live does and what it can do for you. Now to the fights. Again, much like last week, I may have to leave and go pee midstream. Sorry, folks. 75 hard, day 13 today. But the fights yesterday, we had UFC. It was an earlier card. Got started midday for some of us. And what a card it was. I can't. The main event was something that we unfortunately don't want to see. I'm going to talk about that. We have a guest coming on the show today. It's not Jack Goodwillie this time around. We've got MMA Sucka podcast co-host Fraser Crone coming aboard the show in a little bit time here. But we had UFC Vegas 63, Arnold Allen versus Calvin Kattar in the main event. This was a fight that had fireworks written all over it. It was a back and forth battle, expected to be, and unfortunately, injury plagued the fight itself. I was watching it at home, and someone said, "Oh man, that sucks. Is that guy going to be able to fight in the second round?" Now, what happened was Kattar threw a jumping knee and landed awkwardly on his leg, and it tweaked his knee, fell down. Arnold Allen at the end of round one went for an anaconda choke, didn't get it in. Round ended. Obviously, the doctor came in. He was trying to see whether Calvin could get the job done and get back out there for round two. He did come out, and that's where the people that were watching with me said, "Oh, what's he going to do? Is he going to be able to fight?" And I said before, just as the round was about to get started, you watch. Arnold Allen is going to attack that lead leg instantly, and that's exactly what he did. He attacked the leg, dropped Calvin Kattar, and referee called the fight at that point in time. That's what you got to do when it comes to fights. Unfortunately, you don't want injury. You don't want any of that stuff. But at the end of the day, you're looking to claim your stake in the division. He's now undefeated. Continues his undefeated streak within the UFC dating back to 2015 is what they said. Fraser Crone is joining the show here, so let me just get rid of my name on the screen and bring him aboard on the right-hand side of the screen. Fraser, buddy, thanks for joining the show. How are you, my friend?
Yeah, it's all good, mate. Thank you. Can you hear me all right? Is everything,
Yeah,
we up and
I
running?
hear you just fine. Now, I was just
Yeah.
chatting a little bit here about that main event, Arnold Allen, Calvin Cater. It's obviously it sucks that we don't get to see the fight play out the way we wanted it to. It had fireworks, as I said, written all over it. But Arnold Allen got the job done. He attacked that lead leg at the beginning of round two and finished Calvin Cater. What were your thoughts on the way this played out?
Yeah, it's like, I kind of want to echo what you're saying. It's disappointing because it was after, after 5 minutes or after, say, let's say 4.5 minutes before the injury, it was trending towards being a really good, Arnold Allen. I think, even from my British bias, I picked Calvin Qatar just because of his experience against the higher level guys. Arnold Allen's coming off the biggest win of his career, but that was Dan Hooker, who was on a skid himself. Dan Hooker, who'd balled himself back down to 145. I think I was in one. It was one of the British guys. I think it was the March card for Arnold Allen. But yeah, of course it was. It was co-main event to Tom Aspinall. But
Yeah,
it's you know it's it's disappointing to see because this is kind of a freak injury that we don't see all too often. But again, unfortunately, we saw it in another potential number one contender fight in the featherweight division just this year between Brian Ortega and Yair Rodriguez. Now, the difference between the Arnold Allen and the Yair Rodriguez fight, I feel that Yair kind of caused the injury to Brian Ortega, whereas Arnold Allen had no real control over Calvin Qatar throwing himself for that sort of jump knee and landing funny on his leg, and obviously that was the beginning of the end for Calvin Qatar.
yeah, and it sucks that it wasn't an injury caused by his opponent. It was an injury caused by himself and landing quite awkwardly on his leg. Uh, I got you to talk about that because that's what we were discussing before you hopped aboard. But for anyone that doesn't know you, Fraser Crone, you're a writer, editor over at MMA Sucka. Just let people know, dissect yourself a little bit, man. Let me know who you are and what you got going on.
Yeah. So yeah, as you were saying, I'm a writer, but began obviously as a writer at MMA Soccer, and then came on board with a bit more, editing now and again. I think it's been about three years. I think it'll be 4 years maybe in January. I can't remember. Time just flies. You know, um, I'm pretty active on the site. I try and try and get as much content out there as I can because it's what I'm interested in. I'm a consumer of the content, and I like to put the content out there that I would like to read. So hopefully others do too. Every pay per view event, I do a video analysis of keys to victory on the for one of the main event fighters or the co-main event fighters. And yeah, as you alluded to earlier, me and another one of the guys at MMA Soccer, Tim Wheaton, every single Monday on YouTube, on Spotify, on Apple Podcast, the MMA Soccer podcast. We jump on there, we have a bit of a laugh, we break down, fights from the week, similar to what you do on the MMA Church every Sunday. But yeah, we do analysis and whatnot, and that comes out, most pretty much every Monday, Monday or Tuesday. So
And that's why I wanted to have you on. Obviously to promote that show, and we're sometimes shows step on each other's toes, but that's not what I'm trying to do here. I don't want to dive deep into the analysis. That's what you guys have going on. I just want to touch on what people are watching and what we want people to watch and whatnot. Now, this main event, I'm gonna share my screen here. Prior to it, I hopped aboard a local betting site, and it's called Betway.com. And guess what? That's right. This guy here cashed a few bucks on Arnold Allen to win by KO, TKO, or decision. Very. I didn't really want it to end that way, but hey, I got a few bucks on it. So, needless to say, I'm not a guy who's saying, oh yeah, I thought Arnold Allen was going to win on Sunday after it happened. And you can see there, I picked Arnold Allen. But yeah, so that wasn't the only big fight Saturday. Obviously, we had Jake Paul against Anderson Silva. Now, I myself extremely sad at the way that one played out. Anderson Silva looked great for a 47-year-old. Did you have a chance to watch the fight?
yeah, so I managed to catch up on it within the past sort of hour or so, so it's kind of fresh in my memory. But I'm similar to you. It's from someone that's followed MMA for years and years, and even we can you don't even have to follow MMA for years to appreciate Anderson Silva. We can go back on the back catalogue on Fight Pass and look at, back from his Pride days to his, there's grainy footage on YouTube of him
Yeah.
years and years ago, probably before, before Jake Paul, before Logan Paul were even considering a career in sort of entertainment. Anderson was entertaining people, and he's definitely entertaining. And going on to the fight, it wasn't a bad fight. I thought it's probably about the level that Jake Paul should be fighting at the moment. Tyron Woodley wasn't. They were two good wins for Jake Paul, and he's progressed now from a YouTube boxer to a sort of influencer boxer. Now we're looking at him actually. He needs to fight an out and out person that has trained boxing since day one. Hassim Rahman Jr. would have been a really good fight.
Yeah.
Obviously, that didn't quite go to plan last time out. I think he fights Vita Balfour in a few weeks. I mean, that is what it is. That is what it is. But yeah, like you sort of alluded to, it's a rough one to watch to see Anderson Silva lose to Jake Paul and get dropped in that final round.
Yeah, and that's what sealed it really, right? Because I mean, Twitter had it all over the place. The scoring I saw, and then the Showtime guys, obviously, they seem to be a little biased because they had Jake Paul up by quite a bit going into like even the fifth round. I myself had it 4-3 going into the eighth round for Anderson Silva. And then the drop obviously sealed the deal for Jake Paul because it turned it into a 10-8 round. Yeah, how did you score the fight?
Yeah, no, I was the exact same as you. I think it's difficult with boxing to even score it because it's unlike MMA. On the MMA Sucker podcast last week, we were discussing the scoring criteria, the unified rules of MMA, which is damage first.
Yes.
Obviously, discussing the Sean O'Malley Petty Yan fight last week, there was controversy over that. Did Sean O'Malley win? Did he not? How did we score it? And yeah, the unified rules of MMA are damage above everything, then duration. The whole a takedown isn't advantageous. It's a change of position. As long as you do something with that takedown, then it becomes advantageous. Now in
Yes.
boxing, we don't have a unified rule set. It's kind of a little bit of what do you prefer? What do you like? And that's why I think the scoring, like you say, was all over the place. And I think this fight would have been really entertaining to see it with open scoring, but that's not how it was. And again, like you, we have the 10-8 system in boxing. So I had it Anderson one up going into the final round. I can fully understand why people had Jake one up going into the final round, but
Yeah.
I think that drop, which I don't, you did drop him. It wasn't like Anderson wasn't hurt from
No, he
that
popped
strike. In my
right
opinion,
up.
it was a sort of arm punch, lazy sort of jab, and then I think he was just caught off balance, to be honest. Which I would have liked to see the scorecards had he not been dropped, because I'm not quite sure how much of effect that played, especially with the crowd. The crowd
Yeah,
influences judges
of course.
massively. So
They definitely do.
and
And arguably, as you said, boxing scoring is very, it basically just depends on what the hell the judge is seeing and what they choose to score it on. Because arguably, if it is by damage, Anderson only landed one punch in that first round, but it caused the most damage in the round. So in MMA, that would have been winning him the round. It was literally a left straight, I believe, that hit Jake over the eye. And after the round, you could see that there was a red mark on Jake Paul's eye. So I mean, scoring sucks in itself, in MMA, in boxing, and whatnot. But boxing is so. You look at those scorecards, two of them I didn't mind, and then there was like the 78-73, I believe, or something like that, which is completely out of left field.
yeah, completely agree. Scoring is a mess across combat sports as a whole. Even we had Nate Freeman at Karate Combat, and I've seen an interview with James Vick saying he was he really wasn't happy with his scoring at Karate Combat last night. So it's not just boxing and MMA. It's across pretty much all combat sports that judging is all over the place, and to have it that wide in a fight that really wasn't that wide kind of exposes that judge. I'm not sure of the judge's name, but
Yeah, nor
it's
am I.
it's it's it just kind of ruins it a little bit, because it was a close fight,
And I saw plenty of
and
people on Twitter as well, and even in some of the group chats that I'm in, say, because I put a few bets on this fight, and one was Anderson Silva by decision. And if it got there, I would have hoped that he would have gotten it because I thought he did enough to earn the decision or even a draw. Who knows what it would have been if Jake had won that last round without the drop. But a lot of the people in the chats were saying, you know what, it doesn't matter. If this goes to the judges' scorecards, Jake Paul's going to win it regardless. And what's the thinking on that?
yeah, it's a who's more valuable in the long run for Showtime. It's with the greatest respect, Anderson Silva is a legend. He's one of the goats of the game. He's UFC Hall of Famer, but he doesn't have a high ceiling with regards to professional boxing within the next 5 years, 6 years. Jake Paul, massive following for what he is. He's got a humongous following. He's got. I know if you look on our social medias, the Instagrams, the Twitters, the kind of people that we follow, the people are split on Jake Paul. Is he good for the sport or combat sports as a whole? Is he not? But he's clearly got fans, and
Yeah.
he reminds me a little bit of Floyd Mayweather. You either tune in to see him get knocked out, or you tune in to see him knock someone out. And there was a lot of fans hoping that he got knocked out this weekend, but and a lot of fans hoping that maybe he knocked out Anderson Silva. But I think like you were kind of alluding to, the judges are going to kind of favour he who makes them the most money going forwards, and a Jake Paul. Whoever Jake Paul goes on to fight next is not the person that Anderson Silva would have gone on to fight next had Anderson Silva. When I say, for example, obviously he called out Nate Diaz, called
Yeah.
out Canelo. Anderson Silva's not fighting Nate Diaz in a professional boxing match,
No, not at
regardless
all.
of if you win or not. It's not happening. But that's a huge fight. If it is to happen, that's a huge fight. And yeah, it's money talks, unfortunately, and that's possibly why we got the wide scorecard that we did.
Exactly. Now let's share the screen again. Now we see on Twitter Jake Paul versus Anderson Silva. Now the tweets that we see are, you can't. So this one right here from WBC president. After last night, whoever says Jake Paul is not a legit fighter is simply bitter and a hater. Congratulations on the sensational and entertaining win and great show of sportsmanship. These people are all on here saying he's looked great. Even Ryan Garcia here saying that was Jake's best performance and his conditioning looked even better. There's people out there who are in the boxing community that are saying that they liked what they saw out of Jake Paul. And I'll say it for myself. I mean, he's no longer a YouTuber. He's legitimately a boxer. He's put his work into the training camp. We saw it in the preconditioning, the some of the pre-training footage that he did leading up to this fight. His striking has looked a lot better. It's been way crisper. He's got a left hook now where it didn't really look like he had a left hook before. He's not just looking to knock a guy out with that one looping right hand. I will say he's definitely become a boxer, and like you said earlier, it would be nice to see him up against a real boxer. Now, he called out Nate Diaz. He's definitely not fighting Canelo because that doesn't make any sense. I do see the Nate Diaz thing making sense in a money perspective. It might get Jake another win because he might be able to, rock Nate. Who knows if he'll knock him out? It's boxing. It's not MMA. They did get into a skirmish backstage. Is Nate Diaz the fight that you think we see and you want to see, or are you on that side, like you said earlier, where he needs to fight a legit boxer? And I mean, he's had a few chances, like you said, the Rockman Jr. one, and obviously Tommy Fury, which didn't end up playing out. I don't really care to see Jake Paul versus Tommy Fury, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. I think when the fight was originally announced between Jake and Tommy, I think it made sense for Jake Paul and for Tommy Fury because Jake Paul hadn't faced a legitimate boxer. He hadn't really faced any. Everyone was saying, look, Ben Askren is a wrestler, Tyron Woodley is a wrestler who's knocked people out. Tommy Fury hadn't really fought anyone, and now that Jake Paul has kind of, I think he's progressed not only in ability, but maybe not only in sort of stature, but maybe in ability above Tommy Fury. I'm not sure if for Jake how much the Tommy Fury fight does for him. I don't think that really proves anything. Nate Diaz is a tough one because for me, if I'm Nate Diaz, it's an awful lot of money. But so was the Conor McGregor trilogy fight in the UFC, and that never quite came to fruition. And for Nate, if he's in it, if he's in if he's in this business now for the money, he probably does take that Jake Paul fight. But Jake's a lot bigger than him. Jake, this was contested at what, 185, 186.
Yeah, it was a catch weight bout.
Yeah. So and Nate last competed 170, and let's be honest, he's a 155er
Oh yeah.
who just you know the later he got in his career, the less he could almost be bothered to cut down to 155. And I'm not having to go at him for that, but it's a difficult one because I think there's such a disparity in weight, and there's a disparity in how much Nate Diaz is a real. He's a fighter. He's not a martial artist like Anderson Silva.
Yeah.
Anderson Silva wanted to test his skills against the up and coming guy. He's got wins in professional boxing against, Julio Chavez Senior Junior. Julio Chavez Junior.
Yeah.
And he wanted to test himself against the next guy. And for Jake, it made a lot of sense. Like I say, I think that's probably the fight kind of level that he needed to get. He got 8 good rounds, and as Ryan Garcia alluded to on Twitter, his conditioning looked good because I thought he looked in that first fight against Tyron Woodley. He looked gone in the final few rounds, and to drop Anderson in the final round in this one, obviously it shows his conditioning carries late now. And I think to answer your question, does the Nate Diaz fight happen? I honestly couldn't tell you. I personally wouldn't like to see it yet. I'd like to see him face a professional boxer, maybe even rebook the Hassan Rahman fight. Um, do I think that they'll rebook that one? No, because although Hasim Rahman he's becoming a bigger name, in this sort of influencer boxing scene. He's fighting on the DAZN Misfits card in a few weeks, I believe.
Yeah.
It's the quality of those cards. I don't know if you saw. It was mainly a UK based one a few weeks ago. It was obviously we had the KSI, the sort of
Yeah.
first one, and then we had the second one a few weeks ago, which was wasn't even Halloween that weekend. It was a horror show. Some of the skill of the boxing on that was dreadful, to be honest. So they haven't done themselves any favors, and let's see how Hasim Rahman Jr. gets on in a few weeks' time, and then maybe that's the fight that they go down. He's a professional boxer. He's only a professional boxer. Anderson's a professional boxer now, having come from a predominantly striking background. And I was just trying to think before I came on here. When's the last time we saw Anderson legitimately sort of knock someone out with his hands?
They actually mentioned that on the broadcast as well. They
Mm,
said, he's typically in either the tie clinch with knees, or he's landing a kick to set up that knockout, and hasn't happened in ages.
exactly, and
You can't count the Tito Ortiz one.
oh yeah, yeah. I mean, a big gust of wind would have Tito on his backside, I believe,
Exactly.
in recent times. But yeah, like Jake. This is you have to respect Jake Paul for his sort of decision and choice, as it were, to handpick Anderson Silva, because he probably he was informed and he knows it only takes a simple go down Anderson Silva Wikipedia and look at the last time he legitimately knocked someone out with his hands. Like you
Yeah.
say, Tito Ortiz is what it is. Off the top of my head, I don't think he won in the UFC since he beat Derek Brunson, and that, I mean, that was contentious in itself, but that wasn't
Exactly.
like that was a by decision, and he didn't ever rock Derek Brunson. We've got the Vito Balfour.
I would
Sorry,
say possibly the last time he knocked someone out with his hands might have been Forrest Griffin.
exactly, and even that, it appeared that that wasn't. Yes, he knocked him out, but that wasn't sort of like a Forrest was unable to. He just had too much in that fight.
Oh
It
yeah.
was the flick movement. It was the weaving it. That was like prime legitimate. If you want to show someone what a head movement in MMA can be, that's the fight that you show them.
Yes.
But these are bigger gloves. It's kind of headshots only. So you maybe arguably you have a lot less to worry about in boxing because you're not worried about someone kicking out your leg. Like for Nate Diaz, he suffers with low leg kicks. He suffers against big wrestlers. Well, he doesn't have to worry about any of that. He can just concentrate on his hands, which have always been a good aspect of his game. But it's exciting. I'm almost annoyed at myself for being excited for the future of Jake Paul, but
Right.
but but
And I
I'm
will say that fight yesterday was much better than expected. A lot, and even more competitive. A lot of people thought Anderson Silva would get the job done, or Jake, if he were to do it, he would get the job done and knock him out early. It was a competitive fight. It was back and forth, and it was actually really fun to watch. And I hate to say it, but it was. Jake Paul is a legitimate boxer. I said that already right now. The last thing I want to touch on this, and I'm not going to drag this show on too much, especially with this just being us talking about Jake Paul for some reason. But is what were your thoughts when you hear these people say it's rigged? It seems like every time Jake Paul gets inside the ring, they're saying it's a rigged fight.
Yeah, I think people are just looking to illegitimize his victory. Again, when he knocked Tyron Woodley out, it was the whole he twisted his glove slightly before knocking him out, and therefore landed the big. Woodley then knew to drop his hands and land the big overhand. Even and Ben Askren, he'd put his hands down on the canvas before getting knocked out, before getting finished, and with this one, I've seen it, super slow mo of the knockdown in the final round. It's sort of, to be honest, it is an arm punch by Jake Paul. There's no, he doesn't step into it. There's no real power behind it. But if you're caught off balance, if two things are sort of almost running into each other, like the two guys are, taking into account they've just fought the best part of, 20, probably 22, 23 minutes. Anderson Silva's what, 47, 45
47,
now?
yeah.
Yeah, 47 now. So, you know, to say it's rigged, the scorecards don't help that kind of thing,
No.
because that does kind of allude to the judge having in the back of their mind kind of who they want to win the fight. But I don't for a minute believe that it's rigged. With the greatest of respect to Anderson Silva, he's one of the best mixed martial artists ever, but he's not the best actor in the world, and I don't think he could act. Yes, he did jump straight back up, but if he was told to go down in the final round, why would he jump straight back up? And you
Exactly. And
take a little bit of
there were
time.
a lot of times where I said to myself, okay, Anderson's pouring it on. He's showboating here. Crap. What if he ends up getting knocked out at this point? Then it would seem like it were even more set up. It would seem like, okay, he's beaten Jake Paul up. Jake's going to weather the storm and then he's going to rock him. But you know what? That never happened. It ended up being Jake Paul winning the majority of the beginnings of the round and Anderson finishing with flurries. And I can't see a professional like Anderson Silva taking a dive.
Yeah, exactly. And he's had two storied career in mixed martial arts to just completely sort of almost throw that in the bin in order to get a big paycheck off a name like Jake Paul. If he was to do that, he would have done that against another boxer.
Yes.
Yes, there's a lot of eyes on this fight, but it's not like I've seen like yourself when we were discussing it in the MMA Soccer group chat. We've seen posts online about it being rigged, but again, I don't particularly like Jake Paul. I don't know if he's great for the sport, but I think people just look to take away from his victory in any way they can, which you know that's kind of what you want in a way, because no one's talking about Lomachenko last night. No one's talking
No.
about Katie Taylor last night. These two guys are arguably pound for pound two of the top 10, two of the top even 5 maybe in the world.
Yeah, and the
And
Lomachenko
nobody's
fight was
talking about it.
free, I might add.
Exactly. And nobody's talking about it. Everybody's talking about Jake Paul. So, he probably does, for want of a better phrase, annoy some of the boxing hardcores. But it sells. CM Punk coming to the UFC back in the day, that sells. He was on the main card for his debut. There's a reason for
Yes.
that.
And that's the
You know,
thing. This is an MMA podcast, but for the last 20 minutes, we've been talking about Jake Paul. So obviously, he's a guy whose name is valued. And like you said, whether you like to admit it or not, you're going to tune in.
yeah, exactly. And like I said earlier, he kind of reminds me of Floyd Mayweather. Floyd Mayweather, like him or not, you either tune in to watch him get knocked out, or you tune in to watch him knock someone out. And he's got that kind of personality that sort of carries that mantra through. And it's working, because I haven't seen any of the pay-per-view buys, but he certainly knows how to sell an event.
He definitely does. And he knows how to market himself. He knows, he's riding in on horseback for the open workouts. The guy is an entertainer, to say the least. The fat suit that he wore that they kept popping up on the screen for he wants to fight Mike Tyson and stuff. It's the guy is legitimately out there to promote himself and to become an actor. Now, are we going to see this athletic union come about for the MMA fighters because he ended up winning this fight? I'd like to see him and Anderson Silva try to do it. How many years has this been a thing? Forever. It's never worked.
Yeah, was- I appreciate what he's wanting to do. You know, get better healthcare, but get better pay for the sort of UFC guys, because it's very much sort of Jake versus Dana. That could
Oh,
even be the
yeah.
next fight. Who knows? But
With the
but
diet Dana's on, he's looking ripped and chiseled, so
yeah,
who knows?
he's looking a bit juicy though. Is Dana?
Yeah.
He's definitely out of the testing pool. But yeah, you know, with the greatest respect to Jake, there's been far better and far more well informed sort of heads than him attempting this. You know, Bjorn Rebney, when we had it a few years ago with the MMA, I can't remember. It was an
Yeah.
anagram when it had TJ and Cowboy and Leslie Smith and GSP and everybody.
Yeah, I think Rich
And no,
Franklin was aboard with something big like that back
yeah,
in the day too, and yeah, it's none of them have played out.
because
Nate
unfortunately,
Quarry was huge in one.
exactly, and unfortunately, you know, for a lot of fighters, especially for a lot of young fighters that aren't signed to a major promotion, the UFC is the promotion that they want to join. That, you know, yes, PFL is certainly up and coming. Yes, you know, Bellator. I don't think a lot of people, young fighters anyway, look at the One Championship and KSW, because they're just not as well known in sort of mainstream. You know, we cover them because we're hardcore MMA fans, and
Yeah.
we know that some of the best guys are in One Championship, some of the best guys are in KSW. You know, Gamrot last weekend, he's coming over as a KSW champion. We've had Ben Askren come over as a One Championship champion and not quite do as well as he wanted, but we've had, you know, excellent fights. One Championship especially is, they do stuff that the UFC and Bellator and PFL don't do with their, you know, their Muay Thai fights, that mixed rules fight between Rodtang and DJ, and
Yeah.
obviously their jiu-jitsu fights on the main cards. You know, this is exciting stuff. But going back to the original point, for a lot of young fighters, the UFC is the pinnacle. You know, they want to get to the UFC, they want to be a UFC champion. Now, if you've got a big union of fighters who are going to be arguing in terms of, oh, I want to be paid more, I want more medical, you know, these fighters are going to get cut.
Yeah.
You know, and the new generation is going to come through, because not every fighter on the UFC roster. You either need all of them or none of them,
For sure. I
because
completely
it's not going
agree.
to work in sort of like a half effort.
And you know what? To your point, I also think that it's not just the young fighters trying to get to the UFC. I think that's the promotions that they're fighting in, the regional promotions, that want to say they've fed these guys to the
For
UFC.
sure.
So it's not just the fighters, it's the promotions themselves. I've talked to so many local guys that have fought for Battlefield Fight League up here or BTC up in Canada. And I've said, you know what? If you're looking at this from an end game perspective in terms of money and marketing yourself and whatnot, UFC isn't the way to go. You're not going to get paid the most money going to the UFC. Yes, it's a dream, it's a goal, and that's what it should be. But if you're looking to make money and have a family and make money for your family, UFC is likely not going to be the place to be.
Exactly, because you can't, you know, a lot of money, especially in like sort of Bellator, is made from these sponsorship deals. And
Yes.
for the UFC, you know, you can have sponsorship deals throughout your camp, but as soon as it comes to fight night and sort of any promotion, I was shocked to see they released footage of Manon Fiorot last week with a Nike headband on.
Yeah.
That is something. The fact that we even pick up on that is says it all, because
Did you
they
notice also
use.
in the Jake Paul fight last night, Anderson was wearing Adidas gloves?
Yeah, exactly,
So
exactly,
he
and
even got to wear different gloves than Jake.
yeah, exactly, and this is the kind of money that these guys. This is where these guys can make the money, and this is probably why, you know, we put an article out last night on the site MMAsucker.com that Askar Askarov has left the UFC now. Now, he was one of the mainstays in the flyweight division.
Oh
He was
yeah.
one of the guys that I picked. I think off the top of my head, I'm pretty sure I picked him to be flyweight champion at the end of the year. But he's left the UFC now due to health concerns, and he's probably going to make a hell of a lot more money outside of the UFC once he gets his sort of his health concerns in check. He'll probably have 2 or 3 fights outside of the UFC maybe, and possibly get re-signed. But he's going to make a lot more money in those 2 or 3 fights with sponsorship deals and whatnot
Yep.
than he would inside the UFC fighting, you know, Brandon Royval or no, it's not. It doesn't matter who he fights. No disrespect to Brandon
No.
Royval. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying like he's coming off the back of the Kai Kara France loss. He that was a very close fight, and he quite literally would have doubled his money if he won. With some promotions, I know that that's not the case. They get a flat rate of X amount to show,
Yes.
regardless if you win or not. And it's interesting. There's a girl fighting on Eras this week from my hometown, and her gym's about a 10-minute drive from my house, and she's a featherweight, and the UFC doesn't have a featherweight division. I'm pretty sure she'd be happy to fight outside of the UFC for as long as possible. Go over to Bellator if they come knocking. Go over to especially PFL with their European tournament, European League coming
Yeah.
up next year. The PFL are really doing well, and they are really looking after their fighters well. And it's I like with the sort of union thing that is the overarching theme of this bit is I think it's either got to be every UFC fighter or no UFC fighters, and I don't think that sort of the Bellator fighters and the PFL fighters have got a massive issue with it. It does appear to be the UFC
A hundred
fighters.
percent it is. And again, like you said, it is Jake versus Dana at the end of the day. It's not Jake versus, Scott Coker. Because
Yeah,
I'm sure, Scott takes care of his fighters. And like you said, PFL is doing big things. And the nice thing about those two promotions that we talked about, there's plenty more, one championship as well. And Aries, like you said, there's tons of promotions out there, KSW. But the thing that you'll get with these other promotions as well is likely more fights in your calendar year, which ultimately, even if you don't have sponsorships, which you're going to have, you're going to get more paydays because you're going to fight more times in the year because they have less talent on their rosters.
exactly. And it's what I find interesting is I've never spoken to or really seen many fighters that dislike Cage Warriors, which is
Yeah.
obviously the sort of premium, the sort of, I'd say regional, but it's very much sort of like the next big thing, and they feed a lot of fighters into the UFC. McGregor, Pimblett, just
Yeah.
Dan Hardy. Being, we know how many fighters come from Cage Warriors, and yet they never complain about sort of like the Cage Warriors sort of pay, as it were, that the pay structure and the way that Cage Warriors is run. And then as soon as they get to the UFC, they want to talk about, oh, I need to read, like Paddy Pimblett was talking about his contract because he's quite obviously quite a big star. Not many people enter the UFC as such a big star, but obviously Paddy did. And with Cage Warriors especially, they have, shows back to back. They have, Friday and Saturday night shows, and like you allude to, that's you're talking, let's say 14 fights on a fight card. You're talking 28 fights on a weekend,
Exactly.
whereas the UFC occasionally get through, 9, 11 fights sometimes when fights fall off and whatnot.
Yeah.
And like you say, there's just going to be far more opportunities fighting for a regional promotion or just one of the smaller promotions. Bellator are pretty much every, and there's different opportunities. Bellator in Milan this weekend. Eras are in France again. One championship. Um, obviously over in Asia, and it's just there's different opportunities. The UFC are beginning to get back on the road, but they've been to the UK twice now, and I think that is. Am I right in thinking that's it? That
Yeah.
they haven't. Oh, and they've obviously been to Paris once, but
Exactly. Yeah.
aside from that, there hasn't been there's not an awful lot of opportunities for. If you're a European fighter, you have to go over to America to fight, and
Yes.
it's disappointing for a
And
lot of
on the other
European
side
fighters.
of it, if you're a North American fighter, you can travel the world with these other promotions.
Exactly, and the opportunities that are around for by fighting for a quote unquote lesser promotion, a less well known promotion at least. You know, the PFL have got this European tournament going on. with the assumption that most of these European, there's going to be a lot of stacked young European talent. We had Dakota Ditchover making her PFL debut in London, and now she's fighting at MSG on the big championship card.
Yeah,
It's the opportunity for her. She was training in the US. She come back home to England to compete. She won on the card, and now she's fighting in MSG. With the greatest respect to Dakota, I can't imagine that she envisioned fighting in
of
New York
course.
City in MSG in her second promotional fight. Taking nothing away from her, I think she's a brilliant prospect. She's one of my 25 to watch under 25. But you know, the opportunities that are there for fighters fighting not for the UFC and for other promotions are almost endless.
Yeah, definitely. Now, going back to the original point, the MMA union likely is not going to happen. And for you young fighters out there, if you're watching this, it is not UFC or bust. Yes, it could be a goal in the long term to get to the UFC, but make the most money you can leading up there. All
Exactly,
right.
and we on MMA Talk, we cover everything. We covered, you know, we've got Combate Global results on the site for tonight. They're doing almost like a Halloween themed show. I
Yeah.
mean, stuff like that just wouldn't happen in the big league. So, you know, don't be afraid that if you are a young fighter, not get like Jeremy was saying, not getting to the UFC, that means my career's a failure. No, there are legitimate media outlets like ourselves that will cover, the quote unquote smaller events, and any young fighters out there that kind of want to get their point across, get in touch, because we're more than happy to sit down with you and have a conversation, and we'll try and get your point across.
That does it for another edition of MMA Church. I am Jeremy Brand. He is Fraser Crone. Fraser, I'll give you the final thought and let people know where they can find you in social media realm and anything else you got going on this upcoming week, my friend.
Yeah, I'll be sitting down in the same place tomorrow morning with Tim Wheaton on the MMA Soccer podcast. We'll go a little bit more in depth on the sort of tactical analysis behind Qatar and Arnold Allen, and look forward to what is, it's quite a stacked week this week, and we've got quite a deceivingly good UFC card as well, with Marina Rodriguez versus Amanda Lemos in the main event. So yeah, be sure to check that out, and I'll be all over the MMA Soccer socials all week as per usual.
It does it for another edition of the MMA Church, folks. Thanks a lot
Thank
for
you very
watching.
much.